What are the 4 steps to a good financial plan? You need to create some goals that get you out of bed in the morning that will inspire you to save enough, to invest enough. I don't know how you can practice financial planning without really being knowledgeable about taxation. Without that asset protection plan, if it doesn't work out, you are in trouble. Your family's in trouble. Hey, folks. Welcome to the Happiness in Retirement podcast. I'm Bill Del Seti, founder of the Happiness in Retirement Program podcast, because the road to retirement should be an adventure, not a survival strategy. And before we get into the details of today's show, I have to do the honors of a disclosure. Del Seti Capital Management is a registered investment advisor. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Del Seti and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. For additional information, visit www.delseti.com with a hyphen between the L and the S. And the information provided is for educational purposes only and does not constitute investment advice, and it should not be relied on as such. It should not be considered a solicitation to buy or to sell any particular security. It does not take into account any investor's particular investment objectives, strategies, tax status, or investment horizon. You should consult your financial professional, attorney, or advisor. Okay, so let's dive right in to the podcast, shall we? Coming to you from the beautiful Del Seti Capital Management office in Schenectady, New York. By the way, did you know that there was a very top 10 very famous popular song in the 50s, I believe, called I Can't Spell Schenectady? Look it up. Google it. Fun stuff. I think other than being the General Electric headquarters, I believe at one time. Was it the headquarters? Anyway, they played a lot of folks here in Schenectady at one time. And then Jack Welch came in and, changed things up. But here we are in the midst of a renaissance in Schenectady. But enough about that. Today's episode is all about what are the 4 steps to a good financial plan, in my opinion. Okay, what are the 4 steps? And I'm going to present them in sequence. There is, in fact, a sequence that you should follow when you put together your financial plan. And the first step, which without it, what's the point, is to develop your life plan, to come up with the goals for your life, and to create an inspiring future in which to live into. What does that mean? I'll explain. Well, if you don't have an inspiring future that you're living into, then you're living into your default future. And your default future may not be inspiring and may not get you out of bed in the morning. So without an inspiring future, what is the point of a plan? Wonderful book, a classic book called The 3 Laws of Performance, put out by, I believe, the Vanto Group. And I don't recall the name of the author, but in the book, which was written mostly for corporations, for companies, the authors talk about a default future that every company has. And it's the future that will occur if you don't change anything in the company. So every company has a default future, which may or may not be inspiring, especially when the circumstances of that company are not good. So you have to create an inspiring future in which to live into. Companies should create an inspiring vision for the company that gets their employees motivated and changes potentially the course of that company. Well, it's the same with people. You should have an inspiring future in which you are living into, regardless of the circumstances of that future. And again, I'm using language that is used in the Landmark, from the Landmark Education Company. In the Landmark Forum, they talk about this idea of having an inspiring future in which to live into. So you need to have that, else what's the point? Okay. So that inspiring future, those goals that light you up, that get you up in the morning, and which, by the way, the road to retirement should be an adventure, not a survival strategy. What I mean by that is along the way, what was the name of the singer? Miley Cyrus, right? It's the climb, her song, It's the Climb. How do I know that? I don't know. But she talks about, right, it's the journey, not the destination. But of course, the destination needs to be inspiring too. So you need to create some goals that get you out of bed in the morning that will inspire you to save enough, to invest enough, and take actions that are going to move you in that direction. Okay. So step number one, financial planning. What are your goals? There are numerous ways to create that vision of your future. Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits talks about imagining that you are at your own funeral. Oh, man. And what would you want people to say about you? What would you want your eulogy to be? Interesting. You live your life, then you create goals such that that actually happens, or you get as close to that as you can. So that's one way to create some goals and a vision. Another way is just simply to write down all of your goals on a sheet of paper really fast. Come up with as many as you can. And then narrow it down to 2 or 3 that really fire you up and get you excited. And that's what your plan should be about. So that's step one. Create that vision for your financial independence, not your retirement. Retirement means you're sitting around. To me, it just has connotations that aren't necessarily good. How about your financial independence? You're creating goals and a vision for your financially independent years or your work optional lifestyle. Job one, without it, okay, you could still save and but it's not going to be very inspiring, get you out of bed kind of stuff. So, and by the way, you've got to revisit those goals and that vision to get fired up on a daily basis. I do. I look at my vision every single day because otherwise, what's the default when you get out of bed in the morning? Open your eyes, you're probably not fired up. Maybe you are. Great. Absolutely wonderful if you're one of those folks who are naturally that way. But for those of us who aren't, you need to be, looking at that vision and that future daily, weekly, monthly, and making changes as necessary. Okay. So that's step one. You got to have that vision, those goals. Step two, it's not investment planning. It's not income planning. It is asset protection planning. Have an asset protection plan. Without that asset protection plan, then regardless of what your vision for the future is, if it doesn't work out, you are in trouble. Your family's in trouble. So you want to build a moat around your financial castle, right? The modern moat around your modern financial castle. Back in the medieval days, folks with any wealth stored their wealth where? In their castle. They built a castle. What did they have around the castle? A moat with alligators, and they had hot oil, and they had slingshots and bows and arrows and a drawbridge, all to protect what was virtually everything was tangible back then, tangible wealth. Well, now that's not the case. So your modern moat, your asset protection plan, needs to take into consideration intangible assets like stocks and bonds. So that asset protection planning is job number 2. You need to make sure that you have adequate liability protection on your home and your auto. You have replacement value coverage on your auto and your home. You have additional liability insurance if you own a business or in a profession that is litigious. What about having adequate life insurance and disability insurance in place? Okay. And the proper estate planning documents. Do you have a will? Do you have incapacity documents, power of attorney, healthcare proxy? Do you need a trust? What kind of trust? What about long-term care planning? I know it's doom and gloom. It really is. In fact, when we do asset protection planning at Delceti Capital, I do like to paint pictures of outcomes that are pretty grim to make points. But it is, in fact, really, really important that you consider changes that could impact your life and your plan and that vision for your future and how would it impact your family. So that asset protection planning has to be job number two. And you can make a strong argument that it should be the first thing that you do. But to me, you want to have those goals in place first before you build the asset protection plan. Okay, job two, right? Asset protection planning. Job three, now you get into the fun stuff, if you will. And that is, well, okay, you've got your vision, you've got your goals. How much money is it going to take to get there? And how much of that money will be available to you, do you think, in the form of fixed income sources like pensions and Social Security? Okay. Are there any inheritances coming your way? So you need to come up with a budget. And in that budget, you want to break your budget down into two broad categories. Category number one, non-discretionary spending, food, shelter, clothing, right? All of those things, utilities, blah, 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 all the stuff you have to live. Okay. So you need to come up with that budget, but then you're going to create a second budget, a second tier within your budget for discretionary spending, the fun stuff. What's that vision? What are your goals? Are you the type of person that, your goals involve golfing in Scotland, fly fishing in Montana, traveling a lot, maybe a vacation home, things that will take quite a bit of money. Well, that's going to be a very different, it's going to create a very different savings goal than if your goal, if your life plan, if your vision for your financial independence involves spending time with the grandkids and gardening and reading. Totally different plan, totally different pot of money. By the way, you probably heard of the studies now very popular to study the relationship between money and happiness and how much money does it take to be happy. Interesting stuff, subject of another podcast. The old research around that was that once you have your bases covered and have a little left over, you're really no happier with a lot more money than the folks who have their bases covered and a little money left over. Again, a different podcast, but in any event, so you want to create this budget, non-discretionary and discretionary expenses. Then you need to look at your income sources. Pension, do you have a pension? Do you have Social Security? What is it going to be in that future? And then what is the pot of money that you're going to need? How much savings will you need to make up the difference between those fixed income sources and what you need to live into that future you created way back in step one? Okay. And within that retirement income plan, you want to look at how you're invested, your tolerance for risk. There's quite a bit that goes into it. Not only that, but you need to account for things like inflation and taxes, all of those things that will eat away at the purchasing power of your plan. So retirement income planning is step three. So remember, step one, create that vision, create those goals for your future. Step two, asset protection planning, build that modern moat around your modern financial castle. Step three, create a retirement income plan. And within that plan, or as a result of that plan, you're going to come up with a good idea of how much you need to save to meet that goal, that future goal. By the way, when do you want to retire is another consideration within this, step three of planning. If you plan on retiring before you are eligible for Social Security or before you can start taking money out of IRAs, 59 and a half, then how are you going to plan for that? Some ancillary considerations, but big ones, right? So retirement income planning, step three. Okay. Step four is review your plan. Because guess what? Within your retirement plan, you had to use assumptions. You had to make assumptions about inflation being some amount call it 3%. And you had to make assumptions about your rate of return, and you had to make assumptions about when you're going to die, how long you're going to live. All of these assumptions go into a plan. And guess what? Every single one of those assumptions is going to be wrong. Yeah, 20 years out, maybe even 10 years out, even year to year, inflation is not going to average exactly 3% if that's what you had in your plan. You're not going to die at 85 if that's what you had in your plan, most likely, right? Your rate of return isn't going to be 6. Maybe if you're lucky, if that's what you're using. But all of these variables change. The regulatory environment in which we live and work changes. The tax system changes. Tax laws change. Life changes. People come in and out of your life. And your goals will most certainly change later in life. So all of these things need to be taken into consideration. And your plan needs to be reviewed and updated on a regular basis. On a regular basis, at least once a year, if not more often, to adjust for these changes and adjust the sails as the winds change. Now, I didn't talk about, another aspect of financial planning that is extremely important that should be baked into your plan, and that's tax planning. And that's also another ongoing, you could call that step 5, if you will. But tax planning is, it's assumed that tax planning is part of the other steps. So you want to make sure that you're paying no more in tax than you have to, and also looking at strategies that could potentially reduce your taxes. And when I talk about taxes, most people assume it's, we're talking about income tax. Well, certainly it's income tax. What about death taxes? What about estate taxes? Depending on where you live, there could be a state death tax in addition to a federal death tax. And are there things you can do to mitigate those taxes? In addition to your federal and state income taxes, unless you live in a state that doesn't have an income tax, you need to consider state income taxes as well. What about real estate taxes? Now, in this day and age, people are moving all the time. It's a very mobile society. And so we want to look at your overall tax bill, which includes real estate taxes. What about sales taxes? All of the different forms of taxes need to be planned for. And your income taxes need to be paid quarterly. Okay. And so planning for taxes needs to be it's a critical part of your financial plan. I don't know how you can practice financial planning without really being knowledgeable about taxation. Okay. Just as an aside, if you're working with a planner, you want to make sure that they are knowledgeable about taxation, or you either have a financial planner that has a tax person on staff, or maybe they're already CPAs or accountants. In addition to certified financial planners, another designation that's really important, or they have one on staff, a tax person, or the whole team is really well versed in tax, or they have a relationship with your accountant, a working relationship, so they can share information. So tax is also a critical part of the plan. So there we have it. Number 1, create a compelling future that gets you out of bed in the morning. Thank you, Vanto Group, for that, for the 3 Laws of Performance book, where that came from, and Landmark for the idea of having that compelling future to live into and revisiting it when the circumstances are bad, as they inevitably will be from time to time. In fact, that's when you really need a compelling future to live into, and review that. Okay, so compelling future goals. 2, asset protection plan, full asset protection plan. Build that moat around your financial castle using legal documents, using insurances. Okay, step 3, draft that budget, discretionary and non-discretionary spending to meet the goals that you created in step 1. And step 4 is the ongoing review of your plan As situations change, as things change, you need to update your plan. As your goals change, you need to update your plan. And finally, wrap it all in the context of tax planning, which is also an ongoing part of your plan. So there you have it. Those are the steps in sequence of a proper financial plan. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Happiness in Retirement podcast, because the road to retirement should be an adventure, not a survival strategy. I hope to see all of you next week. Please subscribe on Apple or Spotify to this podcast, or you can visit us at www.delcetti.com with a hyphen between the L and the S. And feel free to shoot me an email if you have any questions about the topics we covered today at bill@happinessandretirement.com. Have a great rest of your week, day, year, month. And don't forget to create that vision for your future. Talk to you soon.